Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you are here. So you are here for HoneyBook Smart Files automating your bookings. Hopefully y'all are in the right place. This is kind of our part 2 to our scheduler webinar series that we are doing. So a couple weeks ago, we did a session all about how to implement your scheduler into your smart files. Now you can do that. It is going to streamline your bookings in and of itself. And we're taking it even a level further in today's session to learn how to truly automate your send of these files. Okay, our agenda for today. So first and foremost, we are going to be talking about what are automations? What does it mean? What are these things? We'll go into a little bit of when to use them. We're also going to touch on some common misconceptions with automations in HoneyBook. Just go through some kind of vocab and make sure that we're all on the same page about what they are and maybe even more importantly, what they are not. We'll also be going through the 5 steps to successfully set up an automation in HoneyBook. That's where we'll be spending the bulk amount of our time today. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be doing around 10 minutes at the end for questions. Okay, let me introduce myself. If we have not had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Mac. I'm part of the product education team here. I've been here for 6 years, you guys. I've worked with thousands of our members, getting them onboarded, learning about their businesses, and also happen to be a HoneyBook expert. So I'm going to be speaking to some different use cases with you guys today, as well as introducing you to how to fully take advantage of those tools in the HoneyBook system. Alrighty, so that being said, what is our goal for today's session? So I want you guys to leave here knowing how to successfully set up an automation in HoneyBook. That's kind of our high level objective. More specifically, as I kind of already alluded to, I want you to know how and when to automate the send of your scheduler. So because we've launched this ability for you to easily share your scheduler within files, you've been able to do that in emails for a while. How and when do you decide where to automate your scheduler in your process? And that's really where we're going to be kind of speaking through some of those use cases today. So if you've attended one of my automation sessions in the past, those 5 steps that we talk about are really consistent. Those 5 steps for success that we're going to go through, those are not going to change, right? But we're going to be kind of talking about some of the nuances around scheduler and the send of that, and speaking through those use cases today. That's kind of the angle we're going to be taking, okay? So right off the bat, when should you be using these? What are they? What are automations in HoneyBook? Okay, so automations are personalized, customized emails, files, or internal task reminders that are automatically triggered based on the timing and or client actions. So this is completely under your control, right? There's a lot that we can do with this. So that means we need to, as business owners, take a step back and really assess our process to understand where something like this can benefit us, okay? What automations are not are robotic, generic communications with our clients, right? When we hear this word automations, I get some sticky points. I get some pushback with my members. I hear you guys through the screen even right now, right? Like you're telling me automations, but I really don't want to lose that personal touch with my clients. I really don't want to lose that personalized interaction with them. That is not what we are talking about when we're talking about automations in HoneyBook. What we're talking about when we're talking about automations in HoneyBook is very personalized, very customized, very tailored communication with your clients that doesn't have to be unique every single time. What we're talking about is assessing your client flows, assessing your process and your approach with your clients to see where you can afford to step away from the wheel a little bit? Where are things repeatable, right? Where are things happening over and over and over again? And you can create kind of a generalized version of that process so that the system can run itself. Where can you afford to do that, right? So that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about robotic, generic communication with your clients. We are talking about customized, personalized, highly tailored, highly specific touch points with clients, okay? So when should you automate your scheduling? Now that we understand automations, when should you automate your scheduling? So first things first, I know I've already kind of alluded to this a little bit. You guys are the only ones who can truly answer this question for your business. I am going to run through some use cases, some kind of common situations that I see with members that I work with, to go through a few examples, kind of get your gears turning. But remember, you are the only ones who can answer this question for your business. So if I'm talking about a use case and it doesn't apply to you, that's totally fine. You don't have to use that use case, right? You can be looking for bigger picture of what I'm saying and how that applies to your unique business, right? We've got almost over 500 of you here today, okay? So I'm not going to be able to go through every use case with y'all, right? What we're going to do is we're going to talk through some big level, dream big ideas so that you guys can pick and pull and choose pieces and take that home with you and take that homework and apply that to your own business, okay? So some examples. That all being said, that whole preface being given, what are some examples of when you can automate the send of your scheduler? Okay, so first things first, when we're replying to new inquiries. So an example of this is after client submits contact form, you want them to automatically receive more information on your services and the option to schedule a kickoff call. Okay, this is just one example, right? So with new inquiries, maybe with your business process, you want those folks right off the bat to get access to your scheduler. Maybe you want them to get access to service selection and your scheduler. Maybe you want them to get access to service selection, your scheduler, and the ability to pay for that session that they just set up with you, okay? Everyone's process is going to be different, right? So those are the different options that we can work with in terms of a new inquiry receiving your scheduler, right? Another option might be at the time of collecting payment, which I kind of just alluded to, right? At any point in your process, you can have a file set up to auto send so that your clients can pay and schedule all in one file, right? We know with Smart Files now, we can do that. With Smart Files, this is the bulk of what we went through in part one. Again, if you guys were here at the beginning of today's webinar, I mentioned that this is part 2 of our scheduler webinar series. So in part 1, we really do a deep dive into adding the scheduler block to files, when to do that, how to do that, why to do that. That file that we built in couple weeks ago session is one of the things that you can automate the send of, right? So at the time of collecting payment, you can allow the client to schedule a session with you, okay? So that's another option for what we can automate here. We can automate the send of that book and schedule file. Okay, the third maybe example that we can kind of mull around in our heads here is kicking off next steps in your process, right? So maybe you need to include your scheduler when you're kicking off those next steps. An example of this might be after they've submitted payment, you want them to receive a whole new kind of set of documentation. So you've got your invoice file separate from a file that allows them to schedule and kick off onboarding and welcome them to your program that they've just paid for. You want to keep those steps kind of separate, and you have different documentation or different Smart Files for those things, right? So those are some different options there. The next big piece here, I know I've got some photographers in the audience today. Hopefully, we always do. So with the ability to schedule and pay and automate now, we've opened the door to include mini session offerings in HoneyBook, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so I'll be going through, again, I'm going to be giving a bunch of different use cases, but one of the ones I'm going to specifically speak to quite a bit today is going to be the mini session use case, just so you guys leave with a little bit of a grip on how to do that. Okay, and then of course, the final one here is just anywhere else that you notice your clients need repeated access to your availability. Okay, so again, you are the only one who can answer this question for your business, right? Assess your process, see where clients are requiring your availability, anticipate that need, automate that process. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Okay, common misconceptions. I'm going to go through just 2 examples here, just some terminology in HoneyBook just to kind of clear the air. Okay, so smart files versus automations. I see people in the chat excited about smart files. You love them. That's great. There are probably some folks here today or watching the recording who are not as familiar with smart files. So what are they and how do they compare to automations? This was a big question that we had when we came out with smart files, was people were confused about how they differ from automations. Okay, so smart files are all about combining steps into one single file, also known as a single client interaction, right? So this is about combining steps. You've got invoice, schedule, contract, combining those things into one single file, one single client interaction. Okay, versus automations. This is taking separate steps into multiple interactions across time with your clients. Okay, so this is how it differs, right? A smart file would be one single send of one single file that allows your clients to schedule, pay, and sign a contract. That's just one example, right? An automation might look like the send of your pricing and packaging with the ability to pay immediately. And then 4 days later, you want to send a follow-up email, making sure that they got that file if they haven't filled it out yet. And then 3 days after that, you want to go ahead and send a link for them to schedule a call with you. Okay, so we're talking about over the lifetime of working with a client, what are those different touch points versus taking multiple steps and combining them as succinctly as possible. So very different use cases really for these different tools, okay? The next common misconception here is the pipeline in HoneyBook versus automations. What is the difference here? How do these things compare? So the pipeline is for high-level tracking. This is talking about visibility, and this is really big picture, high level, okay? And these are your general steps in your client flow. So these are things like inquiry, file sent, booked, signed, completed, very basic, high-level overview, general steps in your client flow across all of your projects, all of your jobs, everything you are working on. Automations are very personalized, again, very tailored actions of very specific steps in your client flow. For example, sending a file to a certain type of client on day 3 of inquiry, okay? And this is happening within an individual project. So automations are applied on an individual level, whereas the pipeline, in terms of hierarchy, gives us visibility and tracking into all of our jobs. And automation might be applied to one of those jobs. Okay, hopefully that kind of makes sense, and hopefully we're all on the same page here. I'm going to move on to our 5 steps for success now. Okay, so I want to run through these 5 steps so that we have an idea of what we're about to go into in more detail. I'm going to spend several minutes on each of these, but before we go in, I want to give you an idea of what those 5 steps are. So when you are building an automation in HoneyBook, there are 5 things you need to do. A lot of them are preliminary things. You need to for example, set up your project types. That is step number 1. Then you're going to connect those project types to the contact form. Then you're going to make sure your templates that you want to automate are already set up and built out. Those templates can be files or emails. The 4th step here is actually building the automation, okay? So we're going to do a lot of pre-work before we even get to the automation step, okay? So we'll go through building automations, and then how do you connect that automation to a project, right? Like we just went through. Automations are applied on a project by project level. So how do you get them applied? What does that look like? Okay, so those are our 5 steps. Let's go through them in a little bit more detail here, starting off with project types. So project types, what are they? Why does this matter? This is how you organize your work in HoneyBook. So let me show you what I mean inside of an account, right? So when you're in your projects tab, you've got your project types that come into play here. And this allows us to see who's who, what type of client are they when they're working with you. So where does this list pull from? How does this information get into HoneyBook, right? So we're going to come up here, company settings, preferences, and our project types live here. And you guys, you can customize these. So the first step of successfully building an automation in HoneyBook is making sure that you come to these project types and these accurately reflect what you're doing in your business. So there's kind of 3 different ways that you can organize your project types, in my opinion, that I've seen. Of course, again, you can get creative with these and figure out what makes more sense for your business, but kind of 3 typical ways to organize your project types would be by client type. So client type A, client type B, right? So what types of clients are you working with? Are you, like, for example, if I am a tutor and I work with certain age groups, that's going to be defined by my clients, right? My age groups are my clients. So I've got first graders, I've got second graders, I've got third graders. Those are my client types, and that would be what I choose to reflect here. Another option would be using your project types to list out your pricing. So you've got package A, package B. So we can see down here, I've got web design bronze, web design gold, web design silver. Those are 3 different packages. They're all for my web design, but I have 3 different packages that I offer for those, and I want to kind of distinguish between those using my project types. Similarly, we can use this project type list to showcase our services, or rather to organize by services. So this list is a great example of that. We've got branding services, we've got logo design, we've got mini sessions, online courses, strategy clients. So you can see here, I even have a kind of a combination of these, because my web design, maybe I've got 3 packages, but for everything else, it's a little bit more general or a little bit more customized, and that is reflected here. Okay, so again, this matters not only to keep you organized in your pipeline, but obviously because this is going to come into play later on when we go to automate your process. And how is it going to do that? Well, when HoneyBook knows who you're working with or what you're working with them on, that's going to allow the automations tool to very specifically tailor the sequence of communication that those specific clients receive, okay? So if that was like a very wordy explanation, let me talk you through it. Because we've built out our branding clients here or our mini session clients here, when we get to the automations tool, it's going to say, do you want to send this sequence of communication to your mini session clients only? And you can say yes. Okay, so this is how we're going to get very tailored, so that not everyone who's coming into your pipeline is getting the same communication. This is where that customized, tailored communication comes in. This is how we avoid that robot generic communication that some people think about when they think about automations. This is how we're going to get hyper specific here. Okay. So again, how can we use this in terms of automating our scheduler? So different types of inquiries here might receive different session types, for example. With the mini session use case, obviously we want to make sure that one of our project types here says mini session. So if you're here to learn about mini sessions, that's all you need to do at this step. Obviously, you'll want to have your other project types here, but in terms of the mini session goal, just make sure that's one of your project type options. Okay. On to step number 2, we are going to connect those project types to our contact form. So you have 2 options when you're doing this in HoneyBook. So we're going to come up to tools and contact form. And there are 2 ways to add project type or connect project type to a contact form. The first of which is simply by asking the project type question. So this is a SMART question. We can see here that this answer is linked to the project type field. And this is when we want our clients or our inquiries or whoever is filling out this form to indicate to us what project type they are, what client they are, what services they're interested in, that kind of thing. If we want our clients or our inquiries to control what information is being entered there, we can have this be a public facing question to say to our inquiries, who are you? What are you interested in? And then remember, their answer to that question, because it will be the project type question, can then trigger very specific automations to be sent. So if someone says, for example, here, what services are you interested in? And they say branding, we can have our branding pricing guide send to that client automatically. Okay, so if that is a use case that sounds good to you, I would definitely recommend going the route of adding the project type suggested question to your contact form. The way you can do that is just by hovering, clicking the plus button. You're going to pop down to suggested questions. And mine is already grayed out basically because this question's already added. It's added just above. So if that's what you're getting when you go to see it, it means that it's already added and you just need to hover and find it. And then when you find it, you can adjust whatever the text says, and your list should already be accurate because you've already edited that in step 1, right? So I'm having you go through these things chronologically. Edit your list first, then add it to the contact form. Okay, so this is option 1 for connecting project types to the contact form. The second option here is going to be applying a project type as a whole to an entire project, an entire contact form. Okay, so for our mini session example, this is the route that you'll want to go. So I've built a mini session contact form here. So up at the top, I'm saying seasonal mini sessions. I'm giving a little brief description of information. This is actually just a screenshot of the smart file that I have built for mini sessions. And then again, I have a little bit more information down here. And all I'm going to do is collect name and email. And what I've done in terms of the project type, rather than posing the question to my clients, because I know everyone who gets access to this file is a mini session client, in my settings for this file, I have assigned the project type of mini sessions already. So that is telling the HoneyBook system, anyone who fills out this form, this contact form, which is public facing, right? Anyone who fills this out, they're a mini session client. We already know it. We don't need to ask that question of them. We're just going to assign the project type. So you can imagine, I know I'm speaking in the mini session use case. If you do online courses, this would be the route that you go as well. Anytime you know the type of client that will be filling out this form because of where you share the form or whom you choose to share it with, we can assign the project type. Okay, so in terms of sharing the contact form, hopefully you guys already know these options, but of course you can publish it on your website for mini sessions or online courses or something more specific where you kind of want to, really target a specific audience. I would recommend using this direct link option. So what that is going to look like is essentially just a standalone landing page with this content on it. So for my mini session use cases, anyone else who wants to do kind of a really tailored landing page like this, what you're going to do is you're going to take this link, also lives down here. You're just going to copy it. And this is what you would share with your audience in order to receive those inquiries. So if you're trying to showcase your mini session availability, showcase that you're doing this with your clients, you would take that link and that would be kind of what you email out to your network or your marketing pool. So that link is what you're going to send out to folks. And if they're interested, they're just going to fill out their name and email here. And then as you'll see later on, it'll automatically send them the file where they can schedule, pay, whatever else you need them to do. Okay, so connecting to the contact form, we went through the two options. You can add the project type question to a form, or if you already know who they are because of what that form is, you can just assign the project type to the form as a whole. Okay. The third option here is building your templates. So This is really where you guys need to sit and consider your own unique process and the steps and the actions that you personally can afford to automate or can afford to test to automate. Because everyone's process is different, right? Everyone's repeatability, everyone's tasks, files, emails, all of their communication is going to be different. So again, you're the only one who can truly answer this question for your business. So please don't expect that I'm going to be speaking directly to your use case today. I hope I can, but again, there's a ton of you here. So hopefully you'll just take and pick and pull what you can from what I'm saying. So when you're building out the templates, you need to consider the emails and the files that will be sent throughout the automation process. So as you guys know, anytime you send a file in HoneyBook, it's going to come alongside an email, right? So the email is accompanying the file that's being sent. So that means if you desire to automate the send of a file, you need to make sure that that accompanying email is also set up ahead of time. So you set up your project types, you set up your contact form and connect those project types, and now you're headed to your templates. You got to make sure that all of your messaging is there, whether it be a file or an email. So you want to anticipate that and make sure that all of that messaging is preset and basically saved inside of your template section. So let's go check it out. So when we pop into our template section, first and foremost, I'm going to show you guys a couple examples of files that contain the scheduler block. And again, if you want to learn more about setting up a file with the scheduler block, that's what we covered a couple of weeks ago in our part 1 of this series. We spent a full hour going through it. So if that is of interest to you, go check that out. It's in our help centers on our YouTube channel. I'll post the link in the chat towards the end of today's session as well. Okay, so I've got 2 examples here. I've got the mini session example that I've been speaking through. And then of course I have this other instant booking, more general file that I'll show you guys. So this is what we're looking at. We've got a cover page. We've got some questions for the client to submit. So this is kind of an onboarding, welcome, kickoff document that we might want to send to a client. Okay, that's the example or the use case that we're looking at. The third page here is our scheduler. It's going to have our native schedule available right inside the file for the client to choose the time that works best for them. We go on to an invoice. Remember, this can pull in service selection. So if you wanted that first page to contain a service selection element, you can do that and have those services pull into this invoice. For this use case, this coach is confident that whoever is receiving this file is a one-on-one coaching package client, and that is why she's sending this file. So she already knows what to bill them for, so that's all reflected here. She's also got a contract that the client can fill out, and then of course a payment page where they can submit payment. Okay, so that's one example of a scheduler file we can use. Another example, of course, is our mini session example. So you guys can see the branding and imagery is looking really similar to what I have set up in the contact form. That was just a bunch of screenshots that I took. Okay, so you can make it look pretty in the Smart file and then just pull that into the contact form. The contact form doesn't have as many editing capabilities at the moment, which is why I set it up here first. And then I pulled that into the contact form so that there was a really cohesive look between that contact form that's going to be that public facing thing that the client fills out and the file that they'll ultimately receive after they fill out the contact form. Okay. So we've got some details here. The next page is going to list out the packages. So again, this is where that service selection piece comes into play. The client can choose your kind of standard package, or they can choose to upgrade and get a little bit more. So they'll choose their package, then they'll go on to choose their time for the session with you. We've got some brief questions right alongside this scheduler to say how many people are going to be there, tell us their names, your phone number, that kind of stuff. So again, bear in mind here, maybe you're not a mini session user, but you are someone who likes to ask questions at the time of scheduling. You can see that you can do that, right? So you can start thinking through, have your gears start turning around. Okay, I can ask questions right alongside my scheduler. What might those questions be? What might that look like? Okay, then the fourth page here is going to be the invoice, and we can see your client service selections will appear as an itemized invoice here from page 2. So whatever package they chose will reflect here, and that will be what they are paying for on this payment page. And then we've got a nice little awesome kickoff that says, thank you so much. Look for our mini sessions do's and don'ts guide within the next 48 hours. Okay, so again, this might be way too robust for what you're thinking for your own process, and you just want to narrow it down to a simple schedule and pay, only 2 pages. That's totally fine. You can do that too. We're just looking at a very kind of in-depth example here, right? So those are our 2 examples of some files, hopefully to kind of inspire your thinking there. So you can share your scheduler in files, right? You can also share your scheduler in emails. So if you know that you're one of those people in the camp of the example I was speaking to today, where you like your new inquiries right away to get access to your schedule, they don't necessarily have to pay for it, right? But you just want to kick off a discovery call. If you want them to pay for it, that needs to be a file, right? The only way you can collect payment is in a file. But if you want to just share your scheduler and keep things really simple, and the file kind of thing seems way too robust for your process, you can do it in an email. So let's take a look at this email. This would be in the example of someone just filled out the contact form and you want to send an email that just allows them to schedule the discover call. Okay, pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for reaching out. Eager to hear more about your needs. Please review my availability here for our initial discovery call. This is where I have hyperlinked, so you can hyperlink inside of an email, my link to my HoneyBook scheduler, and select the time that works best for you. Look forward to working with you. Hyper-tailored communication, super personalized, not unique every single time. I know my process. I anticipate my client's needs. I know this is the message I want all new inquiries to get, or even all of my branding inquiries to get, right? Because we can specify by project type. I know I need to send this message at some point. I have set up this template here, and this will be what I automatically send to folks. Okay, so you've got options here for sharing your scheduler in accordance with the options that you have in the automations tool. Okay, hopefully your gears are turning. Hopefully you're with me. Again, if you are planning to send a file that contains scheduler, your email will probably not contain scheduler because that's redundant. If the file already contains scheduler, your email template that it's sent with will be much simpler than this. It will probably just say, thanks so much for inquiring about mini sessions or online courses or whatever it is. Please review the file to get more information and officially book your session. Something like that, right? Okay. In general, we are assessing what things are repeatable that we do in our process and what do you need to automate. So those examples we went through are new inquiries, kicking off next steps in your process. And again, for today's sake, we've been talking through sharing your scheduler specifically. So you can do that in a file or you can do that in an email. When you're sending a file, you also need to set up an email that will accompany that file. So be thinking about that. If you want to send a file, you've got to build an email too. So you're going to set up 2 templates there, email template and a file template. If you just want to set up an email template, that's what we're looking at right here. You've got it done. Okay, moving right along here. Hopefully you guys are still with me, awake. You're energized. We're going to move on. This is the good stuff. We're finally at the step where we get to build the automation. Okay, we finally got here. And you guys, the reason we do all this preliminary work is so the time you get to automations, you're boom, 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 you're done. It's like so quick once you do these initial steps. And knowing what these initial steps are and how to get them done is complex. So that's why we spend the first 30 minutes of this session going through all of that. So by the time you get to step 4, you're feeling super confident, super prepared. You've stepped into your zone of genius. You're aware of your client flows. You're aware of your messaging. And now all you have to do is plug and play and decide the timing of those steps. Okay, we're building out the automation. There are 4 steps that come when you are building out an automation. First things first, you're going to choose your action. So you can choose an email, a file, or an internal task. We've already kind of alluded to this, right? When you're setting up an automation in HoneyBook, you have 3 options for the type of task or the type of action basically that is going to be taking place. I'm just going to click into our mini session example here just to give us a look. Okay, so you need to first choose your action when you're building an automation. Are you going to send an email? Are you creating an internal task for you or your team? Or are you sending a file? Okay, so again, for the mini session use case example, we're just going to send that smart file that we were just looking at. That is our first step. That is the file we are sending. We can see that template is chosen here. And again, I had to choose an email template to go with that. So just to give us a preview, thanks so much for your interest in booking seasonal minis. Below, you'll find a link to more info where you can choose your package add-ons, book your mini session time slot. As a reminder, our minis are being offered here on this day and this day. Can't wait to see you. Go ahead and get started. Okay, so that's kind of the flow we're looking at. Contact form, automatically receiving this email, go into the file and book it. Okay, so that's the flow for mini sessions as it currently exists in HoneyBook. That's what we're looking at. Okay, but again, think through it for yourself, right? That could be the case for you, online courses. Filling out the contact form to, inquire about online courses, receive the kickoff documentation for those online courses and paying for those, and then maybe even a series of smart files sent afterwards that contain that online course documentation. Okay, there are lots of different ways we can go through this. So we choose our action, we choose our template. So whether that be a file and an email or simply an email. So here I've just chosen an email. So I've got my action is email and the email template that I've chosen. Okay. The third step here, let me go back to our slides so we can see what we're doing. So choose your action, choose your templates. That's going to be a file and an email or just an email. And then the next one's going to be choosing your timing. So this is minutes, hours, days, weeks. Up to you. Flexibility here. You got to own your process and know what works for you before or after your trigger, because the final step here is choosing your trigger. And a lot of these things might impact the other, right? Your trigger might impact the file that you build, might impact the timing. So kind of these 4 steps are, kind of asynchronous. Like they need to all kind of happen at the same time. So don't feel weird if you need to go back and adjust things because of what you do in these steps. Okay, but the timing, we can do however many, again, minutes, hours, days, weeks, before or after. And then this is our list of options here. So we have project-based triggers, things like project date, project move to completed, previous step complete, file actions, contracts, questionnaires, brochures, smart files completed, signatures coming through, all of those things. Payment-based triggers, so first payment submitted, invoice paid in full, and then now we've got our scheduler actions. You guys, these came out like this week, hot off the presses. We can see there are more coming soon. So when it comes to automations and using it with your scheduler, using it alongside your scheduler, so in this example, I have this email set up to go 2 minutes after their mini session has been booked. And this is where that kind of mini session do's and don'ts guide could come in. You want to say, hey, within, after a day of the session being booked, I want them to receive the mini session do's and don'ts guide. And that's a completely different smart file. For this use case, I'm just saying 2 minutes afterwards, I want to send them a quick thank you. And I'm just going to put those bullet points of do's and don'ts in an email. I'm not going to build a whole separate file for it. Okay, up to you, up to your process. How deep do you want to go? How surface do you want to keep it? What makes the most sense for you? Okay, so those are examples of triggers. And then when you hit before, the triggers are going to just be limited to project date or project end date. So most of these things are going to be triggered after client actions. Okay, so let's adjust that again. One that I really want to spend some time focusing on, you guys, is after automation is activated. That is what our first step almost always is going to be. So for this use case, again, our mini session use case, we want this smart file with our availability, our pricing, our invoice to go out immediately after that contact form is filled out. So I'm going to say after the automation is activated, 0 days, 0 minutes after. Okay, that's what I want to happen with this. Okay, so that's my trigger. What does this mean in turn? Because you notice there's no contact form thing here. So where do you control the contact form? That is actually where connecting your automation comes into play, right? So all of your triggers, your whole automation is built out. We've just done that. The automation is built. Now, how do you connect it to a project? You have 2 options. So you can automatically apply using the contact form. So this will be either by those project types, or if you generally just want to say anyone who fills out a contact form, I want them to go into this automation flow. So let me show you what that looks like and how you can do that. So right here on the automations page, so again, tools and automations. On the automations page, it says automate via contact form. And this is where things come full circle. Step number 1 today was setting up our project types. And what do we see here? Our project types, okay? So this is where you can start to specifically tailor your sequences of messaging based on the type of client, the type of inquiry who is reaching out to you. So you can say, for example, my mini session clients need to be going through this 2-step process. So that is the route you will want to go if you're doing this mini session use case today. However, you can also say anyone who fills out that kind of first example of the contact form we were looking at, where it says, what services are you interested in? Anyone who says they're a branding client, I want them to actually go through this 4-step process. And this is also going to send a smart file. It's going to be an intake questionnaire. I've got a follow-up internal task for myself. I'm going to send an email to them. And then I've got another task set to make sure that the session has been scheduled. Okay. So depending on who the client is, your own process, you can build out these things differently. You can also have multiple people set to go through this process. So if you know all your branding and your strategy clients receive the same 4-step process after inquiring, you can set that up as well. The kind of final option here is just saying anyone, default for contact form, anyone who fills out the contact form, I want them to go through this process. This is for someone a little bit more general, and maybe that first pricing guide that goes out, that's where you're going to collect more information in terms of what services they're interested in. You're going to kind of welcome them. Maybe you have a video explaining some of your services, things like that. Okay, if you're someone who uses multiple contact forms like this account that we're looking at today, you would probably never use that default for contact form, right? Because you don't know which contact form it is. The way that you're going to use it is based off of project types. Okay, so that is the first option of automatically applying using the contact form. You can apply it using those project types, or you can default for all contact form submissions. Again, this is up to you, up to your process. The other option here is manually applying these automations to projects. So the example of when to use this is in situations where you need the automation applied later. We're not going to target our inquiries in any way using automations. We want to automate the process a little bit later on. So instead of attaching it to the contact form submission, we want to wait until you've had your discovery call to do that, for example. I will say, if you're someone who says, I don't really want to automate my process until after payment is submitted, you can still do that with the contact form, right? You could have that first action be, a thank you email triggered after payment is submitted, but applied when the contact form is submitted. So the automation's up and applied to the project, and it's ready to trigger whenever that client takes that action. So you can still do it that way. So manually adding to project is for those things that need to happen later on, or if there's an automation that's already been applied to a project. So if you've already applied an automation to a project, that automation is done, and now it's time to move on to the next automation. Obviously, you're going to need to manually apply that one. So you'll do this inside of a project, and you'll have the quick apply option, or you can customize the automation before applying. So let's take a look. at what that looks like inside of a project. So we go to our projects tab, we click into a project, we scroll down on the right-hand side, and we see automations here. I'm going to click plus, and this is going to show me my automation templates that I've already built out. I can see my brand and design inquiries. I've got 4 actions. And I can see these different ones that I've got up here. So I can do a quick apply, which will set these steps to happen right away. So again, if that first step is set to activate after automation has been applied, that step's going to happen as soon as you hit quick apply, right? Because that's what the system is set up to do. So if you want to customize and apply, it'll take you into kind of this builder. So this is a good route, even if you want to kind of refresh your memory on what these steps are, what they look like. You can adjust and edit these things before you send them out, and then apply it to the project. So you can customize and apply, or you can just say, yep, I know what that automation is. Go ahead and quick apply it. Okay. So those are your options. Alrighty. So in terms of the 5 steps, we set up our project types. We learned how to apply them to the contact form. We built our templates. So whether those were emails and files or just standalone emails. And again, for the scheduler use case, you can be sharing your scheduler inside of a file or just inside of an email as a hyperlink. Then we're going to build our automation and connect the automation. So those are our 5 steps, right? Project types, connect to the contact form, building the templates, building the automation, and then connecting the automation. Those are our 5 steps for success, okay? And I have 12 minutes to go through questions with you guys. Let's hop into those now. I'm going to start at the top with the ones that have been upvoted. Okay, so Brandon says, can smart files with contracts now be automated? They could not before. Yes, you have been able to do this for a couple of months, I believe. So when you go to build a new automation, choose that first action, choose your smart file, and you'll notice that all of your files are here. The ones that contain service selection, the one that contains contracts, the one that contain invoices, the one that contains scheduler. Any files can be sent using automations now. So yes, that is absolutely something that you can do. So you can do that there. Okay. Chelsea says, will there be a way to create project timelines per project time? Example, if someone books me for a project that takes 3 days, the project time would update so I know the deadline and not the project start date. Okay, good question. So this is actually why I encourage my members and my business owners who are using HoneyBook to use that project date in HoneyBook as the end date. So there's no way to tell HoneyBook or inform HoneyBook that this project type actually means this deadline. That would be something that you're still going to want to manually be doing. However, you can do it, right? So let's hop out of here. When I'm inside of a project, so let's say, let me actually say, this new inquiry just came in and maybe there's no project date on it, right? Because I don't include that in my contact form and I haven't talked to them yet. But after having a discovery call with them, I know that they're going to be a branding client. And for me, that takes 3 days. So I'm going to set the deadline. We'll do 3 business days. So I'm going to set the project date as 3 days from now. So that actually is how I typically recommend using the project date. Use the project date as the end date, because this, again, is one of those fields that you get visibility into from the project pipeline. So now you can see the project date or the date of deliverable or the end date or the due date or whatever you want to call it is now something that I can see in my pipeline. I can also filter by it so I can see out of all my projects, what are my due dates that are coming up that are most pressing? What's the most, the closest thing on my radar that I need to accomplish? Okay. Great question there. Kaylee says, is there an option to add in upselling to the invoice? Currently, I need to input the client's tax rate and which collection they're booking, but would love for the invoice to offer them add-ons. Absolutely. So inside of your files, we can actually take a look. Let me look for one that has service selections. I'm wondering, this one might be a good example. So we can have our services page here, and these are kind of our standard packages. But maybe down at the bottom, I want to include a new section of services, and I'm going to call this my add-ons. Let's see. Let's find one that makes sense. Okay, and maybe this is, I'm going to put a little text up here, and this is going to say add-on options. And you can include, again, even more text, so we can have a little smaller subsection under here that explains, like, please review your add-on options below, whatever you want to say, right? Make it look super cohesive. You might even want to have a whole separate page with these add-ons available. And then all you're going to want to do is make sure that selection is not required. Since these are add-ons, these are optional things, it is not required. And they can select multiple add-ons. And then, yeah, you would be all good. And then all of that would pull into the invoice. Great question, Kaylee. Let's see. Nancy had a question. I am a coach that works with groups and have been unsuccessful at using Smart Files for a group when each group needs to sign and agree and make a payment. Yes. So managing groups in HoneyBook is tricky because HoneyBook is set up for individual one-to-one client communication. So what you would need to be doing is each individual who is a part of that group. So you would kind of like, you would create one file with the intention that that group would be the one accessing that file. So it's almost like your groups would be your project types. So you would have like group A, group B, or your January cohort, your February cohort, like however you organize them. And then you would have specific files and maybe sequences for them, but they would be receiving it on an individual client, on an individual project basis. You're not going to ever be bulk sending files because the way files work is in a one-to-one basis. Which still makes sense, right? Because even though they are members of a group, they're all paying, separately, and you need to kind of manage and know who has paid, who has not paid, who has signed, who has not signed. So even though they might be part of a group coaching experience, you still might want to track those things individually. And hopefully I'm speaking accurately to your use case, Nancy, and it's not just something where like you take on a corporate client, like you're doing group coaching for HoneyBook, and there is actually only one payment, but you need 500 people to fill out a file, because that is where it would definitely get tricky. And honestly, HoneyBook would probably not be the best file management space for that. I would rather have HoneyBook be the place for that use case if you were working with a corporate client and there was one payment and one contract that needed to be signed, but they had 500 employees that you were going to be doing the group coaching for. That's where you would be looking to continue your file management outside of HoneyBook. So if they all need to fill out a form, I would look to Typeform. I would look to Google Forms. I would look to Google Docs and managing those things that way, and folder organization outside of HoneyBook. But the HoneyBook program would still be managing your client flow in terms of the booking experience, collecting payments, collecting contracts, those kinds of things. Okay, hopefully I think I spoke to a couple different use cases there. So hopefully one of those helps for you. Isabel says, my account isn't showing Smart Files. Okay, you guys, I should have offered this at the beginning. Let me get you guys access. So if you have not upgraded or added Smart Files into your account, or if you do not see it, it is because you've not added it. We have not forced anyone into this experience. You have to opt in. So if you're not a Smart Files user yet, you can go and do that now. So go ahead and opt into Smart Files, get them added to your account. That's going to allow you to add scheduler, combine those steps, all of those incredible things we were talking about today, all of these amazing files we've been looking at. Definitely go and check that out and add that to your account. Again, we've not forced anyone into that experience. You do need to add it into your account. Jennifer says, where did you get the link to go to your smart file template? Like if I post, click here to schedule on Facebook, how do I send it to my scheduler template? So smart files are not public files. Just a quick clarification here. Your scheduler can be public. Your your contact form can be public. Those things can be publicly shared, like you're talking about on your Facebook. Click here to schedule. You can absolutely do that. Files cannot do that, not do that yet. Okay. So we're thinking about it. We're working on it. We want to get you guys that capability. We know it's a huge ask. So stay tuned. Hopefully coming very, very soon. But files are not public at the moment. So that's why we were talking about the different ways to get clients to files today using automations with things like that public facing contact form or using your scheduler. So the way that you do that, because I think what you're asking, Jennifer, is can you show me again where to do that? So when you're up in the contact form, you're just going to come down here to get direct link and copy that link. And this will make it so that anyone that you share that link with has access to filling out this form. And then this form can trigger the send of a file. That's kind of the use case that we went through today, right? So share this contact form out so that folks can get added to the HoneyBook system and get those automations triggered. I really recommend always having the contact form be your first step of engagement with your clients rather than sending the scheduler link publicly, because when you share the scheduler publicly, it is only going to collect the time and date and their name and their email. So you're not going to get very much information. They're not a very qualified individual coming into your pipeline, and you just don't have that much visibility. When you use the contact form as the first line of defense with your clients, you're going to get much more qualified leads added to your pipeline, and you can still offer the scheduling link, right? So just get them to get a little skin in the game, get their name, get their email, get their phone number, get the services they're interested in, get a little information on who they are so that by the time they get to schedule that call with you, you kind of know who you're working with a little bit more. Sweet. Okay. You guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sticking to the end. We'll talk to you next time.